Hey, what's up, guys? It's Adam and Shane from Rescue Michigan. Thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. It has been a crazy past week, and we're sorry we haven't had more opportunities to connect with you guys over the YouTube. And of course, I know we all hate YouTube, but we still don't have the live chat going on Rumble yet, but we are going to move to Rumble as soon as we possibly can, as soon as that is available to us. If you're in the chat, let me know, say hello. I don't actually see the YouTube as it's rolling, but we do see the chat come in, so if you can just let us know that you're seeing us. Hey Rachel, thank you for saying hello. All right, so we are connected. Things are going well. We have got a lot of news to talk about. We've got some action items, some activism topics to discuss, so there are tons of items on the agenda tonight, and I think maybe we should probably start with some news items just because people are still coming in, and that's just the way that goes. So maybe we'll save the more important things about grassroots leadership and petitioning and that kind of stuff for just a little bit here. But first, I wanted to give you guys some news on the infamous case of the FBI frame-up of some hapless individuals plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. There has been some news in that case in the past couple of days here. So first of all, we've got this story. This is Richard Trask. You'll remember 2 months ago, he was arraigned for beating his wife half to death. He had come home drunk from a swingers party. That's an orgy. And apparently she wasn't having a good time, and so he tried to strangle her and smash her head against the nightstand. And the FBI has now said that he is unfortunately been fired from the FBI and is also no longer going to be a witness in the case, which is too bad because he was one of their point people in that case. So there was that latest development that just came out yesterday. So there was that. And also, we hadn't covered it, but a few weeks earlier, there was also this story that apparently the FBI was actually somehow looking to profit from what their setup was. So the defense attorneys in that case were seeking data from this FBI agent's cell phone when it turns out that he was involved in this cybersecurity company. And he was actually tweeting information out about the investigation before it was revealed to the public. So these are all, just some legal problems we've had in this case here, and they just seem to keep compounding. By the way, I don't know if you guys had heard this story, but one of the lead prosecutors involved in that case has also been involved in the January 6th cases. So there's some connection there. Obviously, can't imagine what the connection would be. Only, a little bit of political frame up, a little bit of election interference on the part of the FBI. But I don't know, Shane, you've probably seen all this before, but what do you make of all this that's been going on?
Well, I mean, knowing how the feds operate, type of people who work for the feds, that's one of my big problem with what a lot of the Trump supporters and the QAnon people try to say is that, oh, there's all these good guys in the feds working for the FBI, the white hats who are the good guys, a faction of the CIA and the FBI. They're in there, and oh man, they're working hard. No, they're not. All these people are evil. These people, they are, trained and recruited, and they're steeped in this. They're taught to lie to the American people. They're taught to deceive. They're involved in, horrible things like this frame up jobs. Before they started framing American patriots, and American patriots became the new terror threat, they used to do this sort of thing to Muslims, where they would find like a mentally ill or very low IQ Islamic person in America, gas him up with all this radicalism, coach him through a fake terror plot, and then when he went to go get the bombs, they would do a big sting job on them, and then of course the media would report it ad infinitum about how the feds stopped the terror plot, they're keeping us safe, and it'd be used to justify giving the feds more power and more money. So this is their MO. I mean, they've done stuff in other countries, death squad, secret coups, the works, drug dealing in the inner cities. they've been doing this stuff for many, many decades, and a lot of people now are shocked by this. They see it happening to patriotic people, and they never thought this could happen here. Well, it's been happening here for a while, and they're really now just sort of expanding it to mainline conservatives, patriots, libertarians, Trump supporters. Now we're under the the dragnet surveillance state, big brother system that people like Ron Paul warned about from its inception. So all the worst case scenarios have come to life, and now here we are. But it is good to see. And one thing I do think that is good news about this, though, is that the feds aren't getting the best and brightest anymore. A lot of these people are really stupid, really bad at what they're doing, clowns. So we're seeing the empire kind of rot from within. And I do believe that's making it more difficult for them to pull off these schemes, like the kidnapping plot, the fake bogus kidnapping plot, which was obviously fraudulent from the beginning. Is coming, unwinding. These guys might get off similar way the Hutari militia people got off.
I was going to say, yeah, this reminded me of the Hutare, or I like to call them the Hootery. But yeah, it was a similar thing. It was like 7 guys were indicted for conspiracy. They were a militia and blah blah blah. They were all acquitted, except I think one of them got a gun charge for some reason that stuck, but everything else was dismissed. It was all a PR scam, and the PR damage is done, folks. I mean, the whole I remember it was a few weeks before the election, and ABC Nightline actually came out to interview me, and it was all under these soft pretenses. Oh, we're just going to talk about Michigan and politics and the election and da-da-da. And of course, all they wanted to do was try to get me to say something to connect me to the kidnapping plot. And of course, all I told them was, first of all, nobody's ever heard of these people, and secondly, this is obviously a FBI frame up. It's an October surprise. It's a coordinated event, all of which has come to fruition. And I guess it did good enough in the interview. They never aired it, but that's just kind of how that goes. So yeah, crazy stuff, man. By the way, it's funny, if you scroll down this story, this is the Daily Mail, which is marginally better than some other mass media sources. They have done some good reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop. They show here's Mr. Wife Beater here. There's the oily governor there. But they can't help themselves. Here's the photo. They have to include hundreds of people to send on Michigan's capital, as if hundreds of people were involved in this group. It was actually, first of all, it was thousands, but secondly, that was organized by Michigan Conservative Coalition. That was Operation Gridlock. These people, every single person you see in this photo that the media had to include, are either FBI agents, FBI informants, or FBI patsies. Every single one of them. That's what they were there to do.
I think those guys,
to make everyone else look bad.
That was the follow-up to Operation Gridlock. That was the one where the people went into the Capitol. That was the one after Operation Gridlock.
I thought Operation Gridlock was the 30th, no? I could be wrong. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that it was Gridlock, and then the follow-up rally was when the people went in the Capitol for the display, and many of them were armed. I'm pretty sure all of the guns were, they weren't loaded or anything, which kind of made all of the Democrats, even some of the Republicans, crying about it seem ultra pathetic. But it was quite the display.
Yeah, amazing stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's the story. That's the latest. So we'll keep following it. But the bottom line is the damage was done. The purpose of this was to influence the election. That's what it was all about. I mean, I've family, on the East Coast, the West Coast, and they all heard about this story. And actually, I visited my dad in Rhode Island, and I asked him after these stories came out about the FBI, hey, so did you hear about the latest in this case? Oh, no, what's going on? Oh, yeah, the guy was arrested for, aggravated battery of his wife. No, I never heard that. Oh, the mass media didn't tell you that one, huh? So they'll never, countervail their corrections, but that's the way the media operates.
They'll never own up to the false story, and it will continue to be used, in the public debate and by Democrats and probably even by some Republicans as an example of domestic extremism. And we saw George W. Bush came out on the 9/11 commemoration and actually said that, the real terrorists are domestic terrorists. He wasn't talking about Antifa. He wasn't talking about Black Lives
No.
Matter. He was talking about Trump supporters and the people at January 6th.
Oh yeah, there's no question what he was talking about. It's all part of that same narrative. And I mean, I don't know what more to say about this. If you guys watch, I'm sure you guys all listen to conservative media, so you've heard Tucker's take and you've heard everyone else's take on this. Some great hot takes in this Breitbart story. I would just point out, let's remember who these people are. George W. Bush was the president of the United States on September 11th. And he oversaw everything that led up to the present day disaster in Afghanistan. Well, throughout the term of his presidency, he kicked it all off. And let's remember also who the next two Republican nominees for president were. John McCain, Mitt Romney. We know what Mitt Romney is saying about Donald Trump. We know what Mitt Romney says about January 6th. And we frankly can infer exactly what John McCain would say if he was still alive here to see it, which is the same exact party line. And there's actually a great, one of the hot takes in here is really good. Which one is it? Let's see here.
Trump had a pretty hot take on this.
The more I hear from George W. Bush, the more I realize, oops, I guess I just opened the tweet. The more I realized there was never really a choice in presidential elections in my lifetime until 2016. And that's the reality, folks. Donald Trump was the one that was able to beat the power establishment and be the actual conservative, the actual populist, the guy who was actually able to articulate the concerns of the American people. The rest of them are all phonies. They always have been. And, you know, when George Bush was president, I was a college student. I was a left-winger at the time because of people like George W. Bush. And the Republicans were constantly making excuses for everything he did, for the wars, for the torture, for the spying on Americans, for the massive increase in the size of government at the time, for, you know, if you're mad about Obamacare, Bush did Medicare Part D. It just goes on and on and on. They're all cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, and there's unfortunately still a lot of cognitive dissonance among the right, you know, who kind of want to fall back into reflexively that kind of old neocon line of thinking that we're going to go. They even hear people like, "Oh, we need to go back into Afghanistan."
Yeah,
it's like, I mean, that you know, anyone who read the Pentagon Papers, you know, all you need to see is what the Pentagon, the generals were saying behind the scenes, that it's lost, that we have no chance, that it's a disgrace, that it's a joke, that the Afghan military is not a real military. But then they'll go out there and they'll lie deliberately to the American people because they want their big cushy job with the defense contractor. They want they want to strut around in bureaucracy and with a high position and make money. So all these people have sold us out, and you know, it's been a brutal 20 years since 9/11. But we have to learn the right lessons from this. That is, we need to pull the troops out of these foreign countries, and we need to salvage what's left of our civilization at home.
Yeah, and the other lesson too is it's always been about the war on freedom. 20 years of fighting the war on terror, and we're still taking off our shoes at the airports, despite the fact that even that one incident was a hoax itself, that there was no bomb that could be planted in a shoe, but it's all security theater. It's all about what will you put up with. I saw someone sent me a great text with a t-shirt that said, hold on, let me pull it up here. It was hilarious. Hold on, let me find it. It says, today, no mask, no entry. Tomorrow, no vaccine, no job. Someday soon, no microchip, no rights. And yeah, that's what this is all about. It's all about depriving you of your personal liberty. Exhibit A. We all have seen the studies that have shown conclusively that natural immunity is more effective than a vaccine by 13, I've seen some places, 27 times I've seen in another study. And yet anyone trying to mandate vaccines will make no exception for the 100 million Americans who are naturally immune and already have superior defenses against the virus than those who are vaccinated. But there will be no exceptions because it's not about public health. And that's what proves it. That's what proves it's not about public health. It is about controlling your body.
Yeah, these people hate your they hate your public health. I mean, look at all the national policies that have been followed to get us all hooked on drugs, to push, all the most unhealthy foods and subsidize them. They don't care about our health, and the notion that they're putting in all these draconian restrictions to protect our health is insulting to anyone who has, who doesn't have amnesia and who hasn't been propagandized. But I did want to kind of go back to the Bush thing just to read what Trump said about George W. I think he released a statement today.
Yeah.
I'm going to read that right now. It is excellent. And it also shows why that, Trump, despite his failings, is probably the best that we can do on the right. So here's what he said. So interesting to watch former President Bush, who was responsible for getting us into the quicksand of the Middle East and then not winning, as he lectures us that terrorists on the quote-unquote right are a bigger problem than those from foreign countries that hate America and are pouring into our country right now. If that is so, why was he willing to spend trillions of dollars and be responsible for the death of perhaps millions of people? He shouldn't be lecturing us on anything. The World Trade Center came down during his watch. Bush led a failed and uninspiring presidency, and he shouldn't be lecturing anybody. So That's about as good of a statement as you'll ever hear from any politician ever. No one, any other Republican would say some bullshit like, well, Bush is an honorable man, come from an honorable family, but I disagree. Not Trump. Trump will just go right at this piece of garbage, this lowlife, this globalist, this dad who bragged about how they're going to bring in the New World Order. I mean, these are terrible, awful, wicked people. Yeah. And Trump will not only call them out, but he will disgrace them. He'll make them into a laugh line. He, has absolutely no respect for him. And despite Trump's faults, him doing that in the public discourse is amazing, and it never gets old, and we need more of it.
Yep. Good. All right. Well, by the way, in the chat, Us Against Media has a comment on some good bills coming up in the Senate committee tomorrow. We did an email today, and I think a few days ago, mentioning that. Excuse me. We did an email talking about this bill coming up in the House Rules Committee on issuing driver licenses and ID cards to illegal aliens. And so they mentioned there's some good bills coming up in a Senate committee tomorrow. We're going to get to those. They're talking about vaccines, and we've got a number of things to talk about in relation to those, which maybe we can get into now. But it's also a good point to mention, because I failed both yesterday and today in your email to credit Us Against Media with breaking that story about 4835 and 4836, which I hadn't heard of. Although, as it happened later that same day, I actually got a call from a lawmaker in Lansing saying, have you heard about these bills? They're horrible. But we have a petition at rescuemichigan.com about this. This is one of those issues that, look, Rescue Michigan is not an immigration-related organization. That's not to say that Shane and me don't feel strongly about the issue, but any political organization can only take on so many different issues. And we've been talking a lot about election stuff. We've been talking a lot about vaccine stuff. We've been talking a lot about lockdown stuff. And the problem is, the more issues you take on, the more people you have who are your audience that don't agree with you. And the fact is, none of us agree on every issue under the sun. So there's going to be some constituency that's not, as much as we are concerned about illegal immigration. But the reason why we wanted to make this an issue is not so much because of the substance of it, although the substance of it is horrible, but the fact that this shows just how much contempt lawmakers have for the grassroots, and how little they think of us. They left that session in spring with that Senate Oversight Committee report attacking the grassroots. And make no mistake, that was an attack. That was a vicious, aggressive slap that followed just days after about 10,000 people turned in petitions calling for a forensic audit. To say, we don't need a forensic audit, nothing really bad happened in the election, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then after 3 months in recess, which they call a constituent work period, I can tell you for a fact it's more of a vacation than anything else for them. They come back and their first priority, the House Rules Committee. By the way, let me explain for you guys what the Rules Committee is. The House Rules Committee is a new committee. It didn't exist 4 years ago. And when Lee Chatfield became the Speaker of the House, he thought, and every new incoming speaker thinks, what can I do to change things, because they're the new speaker and they're always looking to think, I got all the power. What can I do? What can I do to change something, fix something that might be broken or whatever with the process? And of course, they never come up with, let's give more power to our individual representatives. No, because Michigan's House is very top heavy. The speaker controls all the representative staff. They control all their budgets, all these things. It doesn't work that way in Congress, but that's how it works in the state house. Well, anyway, so Lee Chatfield says, let's be more like Congress. Congress has this thing called the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is like the traffic cop in the House. And what that means is whenever a bill comes up in Congress to the House floor, it goes first through the Rules Committee, which gives it one of three different statuses. One is an open rule, which means amendments are allowed. One's a closed rule, which means amendments are not allowed. One's a structured rule, which means there's certain amendments that are allowed and certain ones that aren't. But the House Rules Committee is basically another tool where leadership can block legislation. And the state house didn't have that. And Lee Chatfield thought, this might be a great way that we can control what the legislation is that's going to be coming forward. So he created this thing called the Rules Committee, which has the power to block legislation. And every bill in the House had to either, after going through committee, go to either the Rules Committee, or I think for any bill that involved an appropriation, the Appropriations Committee, or any bill that involved creating a new crime, the Judiciary Committee. But most of the bills went through the Rules Committee. And the guy he put in charge, Chatfield put in charge, was a guy named Brant Iden, who never met a lobbyist he didn't like. And what it really was all about was making sure that the House agenda was the lobbyist agenda. And then following Chatfield's term of office, Wentworth comes in, and Wentworth changes the name to the Rules and Competitiveness Committee. And what did that come from? Well, what that came from was, before Chatfield, they created a committee called the Michigan Competitiveness Committee. And what that committee's job was to be the fast track for legislation. To say a bill doesn't need to go through the committee process if it's something leadership really wants. And they've got these other committees too. Like there's a committee called the Government Operations Committee, which is like the trash can committee. It's the place where bills are sent to die. And that's why it's so generic. Michigan Competitiveness, Government Operations. Any bill could be said to be something like that. And legislatures around the country have all these things. They have these committees that are really not purpose oriented, other than the purpose is kill the bill or pass the bill really fast. So it was, I think it was either under Kevin Cotter or Tom Leonard or both when they were speaker. They had this thing called the Michigan Competitiveness Committee. Well, Chatfield dissolved that, and under Chatfield's term, that was the dual purpose of the Government Operations Committee. That was the fast track and the slow track. And now, under Wentworth, the Rules and Competitiveness Committee is A, fast track, and B, killing ground, secondary killing ground for any bill that makes it through committee that leadership doesn't like. It's all about controlling where legislation goes. So this bill, these Democrat bills, two of them, 4835, 4836, I think it was Padma Kupa from Troy introduced the one, which is a swing district. They should never be bringing up her legislation, ever. And I think Cara Hope was the sponsor of the other one, another left-wing lunatic, but I repeat myself. And they're bringing those bills up in the Rules and Competitiveness Committee. They didn't go through any normal committee process. They're coming up Tuesday at noon to issue driver licenses and state IDs to illegal immigrants. And look, folks, like, we can talk about immigration policy. We mentioned it a little bit in our emails. It's not good policy. Donald Trump became president because of his stance on the border. So without going into all that, I trust you all watching this understand immigration policy well enough to know why that's not a good thing, especially since you have election officials who will just issue ballots left and right, even when they're not supposed to. If someone comes to them and says, oh, we've got ID and, clearly I'm supposed to be registered to vote here, and it's another loophole they're creating. And all of this in the context of when Michigan is on fire, when everything is screwed up in our state. This is the bill they bring back. First committee meeting after the summer vacation. The Rules Committee brings up these two bills. They're not bringing them up to kill them. They're bringing them up because they want to pass them. So I've been ranting for a while. What's your take on all this stuff, Shane?
It doesn't surprise me at all, considering what the legislature's done over my years of tracking the legislation. Very few things ever get passed that are good. Best you can hope for is to kill some of these awful things, and it's Wentworth seems like worse than Chatfield even. So it doesn't surprise me that they're doing this sort of thing. They're getting counsel from people, maybe not Frank Lutz, but a similar type of person who is in their ear saying that we need to placate illegal immigrants. The demographics are changing. I need to become more like the Democrats. Throw your constituents under the bus because they're dying off anyway. They're being replaced. So we need the driver's license for illegals, and we can go out and say how tolerant we are, and how, and then we can expand to the expand our base with Latinos. But then when you look at Trump ran on Law and Order, and he got more Latino voters than anyone, because what do Latinos in inner cities want? They want police support when there's marauding gangs of thugs burning and looting and shooting. They want police to stop that. They want stable communities. So they went for Trump. Yeah. That's what happened in numbers that were shocking. And so that's obviously the blueprint to getting Latinos involved in the GOP, is standing for law and order, not placating illegal immigrants. It's just going to continue the downward spiral of the country. The entire politics will be shifting leftward. And it's like the Republicans are just playing the role of the Washington Generals to the Democrats' Harlem Globetrotters, which is kind of what was going on before the Tea Party and Donald Trump came along and started fighting back, actually. So, they're just trying to backslide into their good old days of, Bush era neoconism, when, it was amnesty with Bush, Lindsey Graham and McCain all trying to placate illegals while bombing everyone abroad and supporting.
Oh, and then that becomes an excuse for more immigration too. How many Afghan refugees? We don't really have a number. They're guesstimating 50 to 60,000 of them.
And they brought over some Afghans, and they're all interpreters. They all helped the war effort so much that they abandoned ship 5 minutes after the checks stopped coming from Washington, D.C. What heroes! Yeah. But I digress. And I even read that they were bringing some of the Afghans who were being imported over here before the Americans could even get over here. That some of them brought their child brides with them. So more more multiculturalism, and that's what the neocons are all about. That's what the globalist Republicans are all about. And, Dan Crenshaw is kind of the lead Republican in that agenda. If you like Dan Crenshaw, stop liking him. He's the worst of the worst. Moving forward, he's very, very dangerous. He's a neocon. He supports red flag laws. He wants federal climate change policy. And he wants endless war and refugees brought in after we bomb the country. Let's bring over hostile refugees from the third world. Yeah. So that's what they want, and that's what they are trying to backslide us into. And we have probably 90% of the Republicans in Lansing are in on that agenda.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then Tony Jacobson in chat just said, sorry if this was already covered, is the Chamber of Commerce in on these bills. The Chamber of Commerce is one of the driving forces of all this stuff. The name of the game is cheap labor. That's what the institutional right has always been about for them. Ann Coulter and Michelle Malkin both cover this extensively in their books. Adios America by Coulter, Open Borders Inc. by Michelle Malkin. That's what this has always been about. And Coulter has emphatically made the point over and over and over and over and over again voters show they don't want illegal immigration, don't even really care for regular immigration, to tell you the truth. But that's what the party keeps pushing on them. And no matter how many times the voters rise up and kill, with the Gang of Eight amnesty one year, it just keeps coming back over and over again. And that's why
it's not just the chamber, it's also the Koch lobbyists, the ostensibly libertarian lobbyists,
and the DeVos's, sure. I mean,
Americans for Prosperity, all these groups are very much supportive of open borders because they want that cheap labor.
It's all cut from the same cloth, right? It all comes from the same financial sources too. Anyway, the hearing on those bills is coming up tomorrow at noon, so feel free to tune in. I have no plans on going to Lansing to testify about this. I think we've made our point, and more importantly, you guys are making your point through the petitions you guys have signed. But here is the notice of the committee hearing. If you want, you can actually contact the committee clerk if you want to speak. I think you can actually even do that remotely. Tony Jacobson said, this is Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie, thanks for being with us. I'll show you where you can find this. If you Google, or I don't use Google, but if you look at the Michigan House website under the committees page, to go to the committee page's website, there's Jim Lilly, by the way, also never met a lobbyist he didn't like. Horrible representative. Can't wait till he's termed out. But there's the clerk's name and phone number and email address. So if you want to testify, and you can do it in person, showing up to the committee meeting, or else I would definitely give his office a call to figure out how to do that over like a Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever it is that they use. So there is a way to do that. Anyway, so that is that petition. We'll talk more about petitioning in general, because I do want to address some of the what's the word? Let's say pessimism from the grassroots about the purpose of petitioning in general, which I think we want to drive. You know, this is something we got to really talk about, because we've got now 3 big petitions going on at Rescue Michigan. We've got this one, we've got the one on the vaccine choice bills, and we also have, it's not exactly a petition, but it's urging people to submit an official comment to the Secretary of State regarding a proposed rule to destroy the signature match. So there's all those things, and I'm looking at my list here of things to mention before I get into those bigger topics. Oh, here's a small one. I am coming up as a speaker next Tuesday at the Bloomfield Republican Women's Club. I've heard I'm a good speaker. I don't know if that's true or not. I doubt it, but people tell me I'm pretty good. So I'll be giving some kind of address for, I think, like an hour. So it should be a lot of fun. We'll be talking about, the title of the lecture is Effective Political Action in the Age of Censorship. So if you want to come out to that, it's going to be a lot of fun. You have to RSVP by this Friday, so the information is there on the screen. If you don't catch it in time, the video is going to be archived on YouTube here at the same link where you're watching it right now, and just pause the video when you get to that point. So there is that. Also, excuse me, I actually got a call from Senator Rand Paul himself the other day, not to name drop, but it was only a 5-minute call, but he mentioned he's going to be in Birmingham a week from, no, this Sunday, this very Sunday. And it was a short call. We talked a little bit about vaccine mandates and all the excellent work he's been doing in the U.S. Senate on that. And we talked briefly about messaging. He had mentioned, you know, one of the things that he thinks is so important to hit on is how outrageous it is that the healthcare workers who have been putting their lives on the line this whole time are now being attacked. And I said, you know, we've been saying kind of the same thing, that the whole hypocrisy of the fact that they're not making any explanations for, or any excuses for mandates, just shows that it's really all about control. But anyway, so he said he's going to be in Birmingham this Sunday. It's some kind of fundraising event. I was at one similar to this a year or two ago in Detroit, and it's really great. It's really intimate. But I still have not heard back from his office with the details on the event. So as soon as we get those, we will send those out. But in the meantime, because I hope we'll have that out for you guys tomorrow at the latest. But anyway, it's this Sunday, probably in the daytime. So, you know, keep that in mind with respect to your schedule. If you want to go see Senator Rand Paul right here in Birmingham, Michigan, in the Metro Detroit area, that is coming up this Sunday. Details to come. Let's see, what else do I have here? We've got lawsuits, vaccine stuff, and actually Rachel has been talking about, she mentioned Senate Bill 600 and 603. They're having, I think, hearings in the Senate about these bills. And I mentioned them briefly in another video with respect to Senate Bill 600. There's a few others. The problem with Senate Bill 600, I'll show you. This is Senate Bill 600. I'll pull it up right now. This is the bill as introduced. The problem is everything in the content of the bill talks about EUA vaccinations, which are emergency use authorization vaccines. And that's going to be a problem because the FDA has at least one vaccine, and probably more to come soon, that are not emergency use authorized only. They're now the official vaccine. So throughout the language of the bill, it's talking about EUA. Now, it is possible the bill is amended either in committee or on the Senate floor or in some later step in the process. These are good bills introduced by Senator Tice, who is, of course, one of the co-signers of that Senate Oversight Committee report. She's done good work on this and other things, and I really hope she redeems herself by actually reversing her position and denouncing or apologizing or something for that Senate Oversight Committee report. She still hasn't. In fact, my county GOP committee had a meeting last month where they talked to her for about an hour and a half, and she made a lot of explanations and excuses, and said she didn't know that Matt DePerno had a previous legal relationship with Ed McBroom. Oh, she was only one member of the committee for that line about the Attorney General going after those who are supposed to be profiteering from election fraud. But to me, that's not enough. And I respect her work in a lot of policy areas elsewhere. I think she's generally one of the good guys, but I'm also kind of fed up with Republicans apologizing to Democrats for things they have no reason to apologize for, and yet they will absolutely refuse in Stonewall to ever admit any wrongdoing when it's against our side. So there is
that's why I've like kind of I know we've kind of maybe disagreed on this, but I'm the controlled opposition type people who are with you 90% of the time, but then stab you in the back when it matters the most. To me, those are the worst of the worst in my eyes. I have the least amount of respect.
Yeah, well, as I say, I don't think she should be spared from any criticism unless she's going to do anything whatsoever to atone for what she did, putting her name on that report. And so far, that has been nothing. So that's just how that goes. Anyway, lawsuits on vaccines, because this actually gets right to this topic about the emergency use authorization versus the experimental, or the emergency use versus the FDA approved vaccine. I want to talk about two lawsuits. The first one, we've mentioned this before, but Western Michigan University, let me move this back into frame here, had another victory in court this past Thursday. This was at a federal court in Kalamazoo, Western District of Michigan. When this lawsuit was first filed, the judge issued a temporary restraining order, meaning before I even hear this case, I'm going to give you relief, because that's how important this is. So that was a very good sign. And these are for students that had issued a religious exemption statement. This same judge, by the way, also ruled in the opposite on a temporary restraining order against Michigan State University, where students asserted they didn't need the vaccine and they have their right to their bodies because they had recovered from COVID. So, that's not a good sign on that respect, although a temporary restraining order is a very, very high bar legal remedy where a judge is so inclined to, it's really a four-part test. You have to, number one, establish that the harm that would be done by not issuing a restraining order is so grave and so severe that they have to issue it right away, even before they've heard the other side. And they have to show that they're likely to prevail on the merits of the case. So it doesn't mean that the lawsuit against MSU has been lost. It just means the judge wouldn't issue a TRO on that. But it also shows that at least this federal judge is going to be more amicable to a religious exemption than to the exemption because the person has already had COVID and has vastly superior immunity. And I don't think I think if anything, the other is at least as good of a reason. And so that's all going on. But anyway, the judge had a hearing this past Thursday. And he says he's going to go ahead and extend the TRO until he drafts the preliminary injunction. Let me see if I can find that quote here. The restraining order will last until Maloney issues a written opinion granting the preliminary injunction, which the temporary restraining order and the preliminary injunction are the same thing, essentially. So he's just saying, yeah, this is going to apply all the way through the pendency of the case. So that's a huge victory there. So the release exemption is doing well in courts. That's a good sign. The other one is not so much. I think it's on the 22nd. I think the MSU case is getting the hearing before the same judge. So, and that's the one where the case is about those who are immune from having COVID. So we'll see where all of that goes. But I also want to bring up this other lawsuit. This is a federal lawsuit that was filed by Children's Health Defense. That is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s organization. And they have sued the FDA itself. The attorney on this case, by the way, is one of my favorite people. I'll show you here, Robert Barnes. He is also one of the attorneys representing Kyle Rittenhouse. He's also represented Alex Jones. He's also represented the Covington kids. He is a very passionate defender of civil liberties. He's got a show on YouTube with Viva Fry. You should check that out. Viva Fry and Robert Barnes. And of course, besides on YouTube, they're also on Locals. They've got a great community there. And they talk about all kinds of legal topics every week, the same way we talk about political topics, which to some degree overlap, but to some degree they're different. Anyway, this case, it says it's 131 pages, but most of those are exhibits. You just saw the signature at the bottom is at only page 11, so it's a fairly short lawsuit. And it's making a really important argument here about the distinction between the emergency use authorization versus the approval that was given to the community drug. So I'll just I'll read the top of the lawsuit here, and we'll post a link on in the description here after the video gets published, and we'll put it on our website as well. But here's the point. The FDA faced a conundrum. Under immense political pressure to rush approval of a COVID-19 vaccine in record time to satiate the mandate fervor of some in the military and corporate America, the FDA acted without consulting its advisory board, without answering citizen petitions. I'm going to highlight this. Citizen petitions. This will be important for what we're talking about in a moment here. Without addressing scientific concerns, and even without updating its data regarding the Delta coronavirus variant. Knowing that approval and licensure of such a vaccine required revoking all emergency use authorized vaccines for the same indication, and knowing that revocation would risk liability exposure to vaccine makers, government actors, and healthcare workers, the FDA did the impermissible. It answered this conundrum by pretending to approve a vaccine that isn't widely available, playing a game of bait and switch and confusing the public into thinking they are getting a vaccine with some legal remedies when in fact they are not because of the bait and switch. The FDA purportedly managed to do what the law forbids. Approve a vaccine, but not revoke any emergency use authorized vaccines for the same indication. So there's a few things going on here. Under the law, an emergency use authorized medical treatment cannot exist if an approved treatment exists. So that is why the FDA will not allow ivermectin to be a COVID treatment or any other drug, hydroxychloroquine, anything else, because the pharmaceutical industry is making tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars on their emergency use authorized vaccines. But they have a problem with people having a legal remedy, a choice not to take an unapproved emergency use vaccine. So the FDA is trying to have it both ways. So they're saying we're gonna authorize this vaccine, which is not available under this label, at least in the United States, not yet, but we'll still let you mandate these experimental vaccines. And this suit gets to the heart of all of these issues. A suit has been filed in the Eastern District of Tennessee, which I'm just gonna go out on a limb and guess is probably the best jurisdiction they could possibly find in the United States. Just guessing that's how that works. But that's the suit. It was just filed August 31st, so it's quite fresh. I don't know if it's gone anywhere just yet, but this is going right to the heart of the entire matter, the entire hypocrisy of the FDA on one hand saying we're going to approve a vaccine that hasn't been adequately tested, but then on the other, by the way, people in the chat are asking AFP. Yeah, AFP is Americans for Prosperity. Shane, you said they're pro open borders. I don't dispute that characterization, but feel free to do your own homework, look it up yourselves, guys. But that's my understanding too. I've never known the AFP to be anything relating to supporting an America First border policy. And I would bet if I pulled open Michelle Malkin's book, I'd read more about that. But I'm sure you're right about that.
Yeah, they do good on fighting the infrastructure bill and other stuff, tax policy, spending policy, but on trade and immigration, they're very much pro-globalist in their outlook. Yeah,
they're what Justin Raimondo used to call cosmotarians. They're libertarians when the libertarian position is hands off my wealth, and that's about it. It doesn't go much farther than that.
Bingo.
Anyway. So this is the lawsuit. I don't want to read it word for word, but you guys should definitely check it out. You can find it at childrenshealthdefense.org. I don't think we have a post up on our website on that yet, but I will make one, and I will link it in the description so you guys can read the original for yourselves. So that is all out there, and it's a very, of course, as Robert Barnes, it's a very well written lawsuit. So definitely check that out. So we've talked about the lawsuits. We've talked. Let's talk about Benson's administrative rules, because there's one that we have a petition on, but there's actually 3 that she's issued. And we only brought up the one because I think it's the worst by far and the one that's the most dangerous and needs the most immediate action. But there's 2 others as well, and they have the same deadline for public comments, the same hearing date. And then I think after that, we can talk about just in general effective activism and why signing these petitions is important and is effective. So we're already 47 minutes in, so I think after that we'll close. But that's still a lot to go over. So anyway, our petition, in fact, let me pull it up here. Hold on one sec. Let me get a browser window going here. This is our petition on opposing the Secretary of State's rule gutting the signature match requirement. And if you guys want more details on this, we had a great chat with Patrice Johnson of Pure Integrity for Michigan Elections Thursday before last. That's on our channel, so you can check that out, where we read through this word for word. But this is the gist of it. Jocelyn Benson's announced this regulation that is literally a roadmap for fraud, a foolproof formula for forgery, for fraudsters, like that alliteration there. It literally gives them, first of all, the presumption that the signature is valid, and then only if it meets a high standard for forgery, multiple significant and obvious variations. And even at that stage, any single redeeming quality makes it required to be valid. And that can be anything the election official makes up. And then they also give them some obvious things that they can easily use. For example, your hand is shaking. And I know where this comes from. Senior citizens can develop conditions where their hands shake. And that's their excuse. But what that means is that all anyone has to do when they're forging a signature is just shake your hand. And your signature has to be presumed valid. Not to mention, they say if you're signing it in a rushed manner, like scribble, that's a valid signature. So it renders the signature match totally meaningless. And this is a proposed administrative rule, which means that the public has until October 1st to submit comments for the record. Those comments have to be archived. They have to be part of the official record. They have a hearing on it coming up on October 1st in Detroit. We'll talk more about that when we get a little bit closer to the date. But again, it's critical to get people to voice their concerns because, first of all, the legislature might take this up. There's a committee in the legislature, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules. It's the only bicameral committee. There's House and Senate members on it. And whenever the executive branch tries to pass a rule, this committee gets to review it. And they can oppose it. They can put a 270-day hold on it. They can actually introduce legislation that would co-opt it or replace it. So there's all kinds of possible avenues where this could be fought in the legislature and potentially even delaying it past the next election. And as we saw in that lawsuit, citizens' petitions sometimes become relevant in lawsuits. Because if the Secretary of State can't answer why it is that her proposal would make the signature verification completely, utterly meaningless and makes no attempt to address that, then they have a problem potentially in the courts. So, I don't know. I've been rambling for a long time. Shane, what's your take on all this?
It's bad that Jocelyn
Yeah.
Benson is trying to make it so that every election is total fraud.
Not surprising,
it's
though.
awful, and we need to, we need to have a huge display on October 1st. I don't think that'll be too hard. I know that there's a lot of people who are active and mobilized, and that gives us a little bit of time to get the word out about it. So I anticipate that we'll be able to fight this pretty hard. So that's good. One thing I did want to add about, the petitioning and going door to door and stuff like that is I was on a call today with a lot of people who are on the Michigan State GOP committee. They had 4 experts on there, one of whom Senator Colbeck, another Dr. Frank, and a couple others. And I don't want to really get into what they said on the call too much. Some of that might have been sensitive, but basically, when I asked a question, what's the deal with this, everything that's going on in Arizona? It just seems like they keep telling us, oh, the big news is coming, the big news is coming.
I've heard that for a while.
Yet nothing ever seems to come out, and there's a few interesting tidbits, but nothing earth-shattering. And basically what they said is, don't expect anything that earth-shaking. Expect, some more information that's similar to what we already know in all these different battleground states. But what is necessary now is to make the case with the information that we have and continues to come out of the fraud, of the need to reform this and get involved and build your local communities.
You mean like the thing that we've been doing from the beginning of the year, where we weren't waiting for an audit?
Exactly. So that was what they said. What the experts said was that we need to get in the community and we need to build our local source of power. Which is what we've been saying. A lot of people, they want the easy fix. They want to think that there's all these hacker men and all these, the good guy bureaucrats and American patriots in our government. They're working behind the scenes to do the right thing. Well, in most cases,
so you mean our plan that we released on April 15th didn't need to wait for an audit to be passed into law by a citizens initiated law that would take about a year and then another 6 months to be implemented? You mean we could actually look back at what we had documented evidence of having happened on election day and said we already knew the fraud existed? We can already look at the the signature verification being ruled illegal, the poll workers being impeding poll challengers, the poll workers being controlled by who they were hiring. All these things we've been talking about for months and months and months. You mean to tell me that we don't actually need an audit, a forensic audit to tell us that there was a problem in the election, to figure out that there should be solutions, that without even having a forensic audit, we can craft policies to make sure the next election is safe? Wow. I wish we'd come up with this 5 months ago. Wait.
We did. I mean, but the thing is, it almost makes me think, the more I see these documentaries, the more I see these reports and what's coming out of Arizona, a lot of this stuff, I want everything to be, investigated and every voting computer to be opened up. Of course, I would love to see that, but is this just a big red herring? Is there nothing there? Everyone focusing on these documentaries and these personalities and these borderline cult leaders with their bizarre things that they're saying that don't make a whole lot of sense, but everyone seems to run with them. And the chasing the audit, why not just focus on the evidence that we have right now and hammer people with that? Why don't we go door to door, build up a local organization? If you have a bad county clerk or city clerk, use your local organization to replace them with a patriot. There's so many different things that could be done, still can be done. It's not like it's a lost cause yet, but we have lost time, listening to obvious charlatans being desperate, going down, being led by these Pied Pipers and, not really caring if the information they're telling us is accurate or not. So we have to be better. We have to be more diligent. And I was encouraged by the call because it does seem like, it was good information that was given by the people. And it does seem like they're getting more practical about what we need to do moving forward to remedy this gigantic problem that's in front of us.
Yeah. Real quick, before I get back to these other rules of the SOS, Bianca asked, going back to what you were talking about before, is there a way that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine might be authorized for use for treatment? There's not enough focus on therapeutics. Well, so here's the thing, Bianca. Ivermectin is already approved for other purposes, and doctors can and have been prescribing it in record numbers. The problem is the FDA, if they were to approve COVID, ivermectin or any other drug as a COVID treatment, it would instantaneously trigger the revocation of the emergency use authorized drugs, and which is why they will never do it. So it will never be authorized for that purpose. The pharmaceutical industry will not allow it, and the FDA, of course, works for them, as does Congress, as does every legislature and the media. So that's the way that goes. But the prescriptions for ivermectin tell the story. Doctors have been prescribing it by the thousands and thousands and thousands. So anyway, all right, getting back to election stuff. So I want to tell you guys about these other two proposed rules. As I said, the biggest one, the most important one, is the signature match. And that's why we've been slamming on that. Please, if you haven't already done so, make sure you send a letter to the Secretary of State on that. Actually, before I go on, I need to make another important point. We did cover this in a short video I put up, I think yesterday, maybe the day before. But some things have changed at rescuemichigan.com, and I got to come clean with you guys. We discovered a couple weeks ago that our website was not properly sending what it's called transactional emails. And what that means is when I send out an email blast to our entire email list, it goes through this third-party service. We use Constant Contact, but there's others out there, of course. But when you sign a petition to the lawmakers and it says your petition will be sent to the lawmakers, what happens is our website itself is supposed to have sent those petitions over to them. Well, what we discovered was going on was it wasn't actually doing that. So what we did was, first of all, on Friday, I literally delivered 556 pages worth of petitions in support of those Sue Aller House bills on vaccine choice, so that every single legislative office got a hard copy of them. And we also fixed the site. We got a new third-party vendor to do transactional emails. So what should happen now is that when you sign a petition on our site from now on, starting actually a few days ago, you will actually get a BCC of the email that went to your state lawmakers, and you should get a CC email when you send in a comment to the Secretary of State for the proposed rule change. If you did not get one, first of all, check your spam folder. Second of all, there's a chance, and I've seen them, some of you occasionally do have typos in your own email addresses. That can happen. But you can, A, number one, always fill it out again, or B, feel free to call the Secretary of State or your state lawmaker and say, did you get my email? Because what you should now have is a BCC'd copy of the email that our website generates and actually sends in real time to each of your state legislative offices when you sign those petitions, or to the Secretary of State when you sign that public comment form. So that's the way that all works. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. By the way, one of the things I discovered was the contact us form on our website. That was one of the things that the transactional emails weren't sending to, so I've got to clean out that inbox too. So I do a backlog on emails and all that. And guys, I'm so sorry for this. You know, it's just a work in progress to see how this stupid tech stuff works. And frankly, I mean, I am kind of a software engineer, but the people that write these APIs for doing stuff like transactional emails and credit card processing make me feel dumb. And it's not easy to get the hang of some of these things. So I'm pretty certain we've gotten all of that squared away right now. Like I said, you should be receiving copies of any petitions you sign on our website. And as I said, we did, in fact, hand deliver all of those petitions on the vaccine choice to the state legislature. So that's just the latest on that. And again, if you have any doubts if your petition came in, feel free to call these people and ask them and see what you can find out, because that all works well too. I mean, I would encourage everybody to call your state representatives tomorrow morning about these frickin' immigration bills coming through the Rules and Competitiveness Committee, and anything else too. In terms of what's most, I get asked this question a lot. What's the most effective way to contact your lawmakers? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a handwritten letter? All of those things are effective. And all of them work in varying ways. Emails are perfectly fine. Phone calls work well too. Sometimes lawmakers will not answer phone calls from foreign area codes when they know there's some group pushing for some bill in a big way. But they do get their emails. They do check their emails, and letters, whether or not they're handwritten. In fact, I've given lectures on how actually sometimes those postcards are more effective than a handwritten individual letter. But that's another topic we'll probably talk about in Bloomfield next Tuesday. Anyway, all that to say, your petitions are definitely being delivered, and if you have any doubts about that, feel free to reach out to me or to your recipients, your state lawmakers, about that, and double check, verify. A phone call to follow up is always a good thing. It's just more input to them. The more you light them up, the better. Anyway, all right, so we've got these other two rules. There's rule 2021-61. That's the one we've been talking about. That was this one here. Rule set 2021-61. There's also 60 and 62. So what do those do? Number 60 would create a process for disqualifying candidates based upon certain information on a candidate's affidavit of identity. So under the proposed rule, candidates would be required to identify every jurisdiction they have previously sought nomination or election in on the affidavit of identity. So this pertains to people who are running for public office, requiring a disclosure of them and saying that they can be disqualified if they make a false statement on their affidavit. And I'm being told by my source this process was used to disqualify multiple Republicans from running for statewide office. However, funnily enough, not a single Democrat with the same issues was disqualified. So there's that. It applies to candidates. Again, not as big a thing as the signature match, which affects, probably 7 million absentee ballots, give or take. But we'll have more information on that in an email blast, because we should also have our statements put on the record on that as well. And finally, there's also rule set 2021 number 62. And this would require using a voter's stored digital signature on file with the Michigan Secretary of State and signing the online absentee voter ballot application. So voters would not be required to provide an original ink signature on the application. So essentially it's saying you can use my digital signature, which is, of course, not a signature. The whole point of a signature is I'm signing this document. Again, the application's not as big of a deal as the ballot itself, but these are still important things to do. So we do want to weigh in on each of those three, and the deadline for all of them is October 1st. So we'll talk more about those in an upcoming email blast. But I want to talk more now, and I think this is where we'll probably close the show on, because we're at over an hour now, about petitioning in general. Because I've gotten emails this past week, not as many as I've gotten petition signatures, but I've gotten plenty of emails about how pointless this all is. And I mentioned one in a video I had the other day where the guy basically said, if we don't have a military coup, there's nothing else we can do. And folks, and Shane, you've heard the same kind of thing from people, I'm sure. We've had people burn out and throw up their hands and give up and say this whole process, it just doesn't work. And there's a lot to unpack in that statement. But I think the first place to start is to point out that's what they want you to think. They want you to think it doesn't matter. They want you to give up. They want you not to try. That's the first thing. And
yeah, they want to demoralize us, atomize us, make us isolated, because they know, and that's why they're doing this giant crackdown, is because they know we have major numbers right now. Trump has opened the eyes of so many people. So many people are coming out of the woodwork in the grassroots from in every area. And if there is smart tactics that are followed, and we don't get Pied Pipered by complete idiots, we could have an effective local organization in every city practically across America and take our country back. So that's what they don't want us to do. And, and they want to demoralize us. And unfortunately, so a lot of patriots do fall into that.
Yeah. What I have on my screen right now, it's going to be probably hard to read, but it is available at rescuemichigan.com's Grassroots HQ. If you sign up and get your precinct file, you will also get a copy of this book from, actually, it's published originally back in the 60s, about how personal contact can win elections. And when you see it in practice, you realize how getting involved does make a difference. For me, it was a candidate I was working for winning his election by 300 votes. And then a couple years later, another candidate winning by 19 votes. Folks, vote fraud exists. It's a thing. But it's not the thing that some people are making it out to be, where it's an absolute total fraud where your vote counts for absolutely nothing. There are some votes that can be manipulated. Some absentee votes. Maybe sometimes people show up and vote twice with a fake ID, stuff like that. It can happen. It's not all pervasive to the point where everything that happens is a complete and total fraud. And this is one of the more dangerous things that some of the election fraud people have been putting out there is, oh, Donald Trump won California. Well, and I'm rooting for Larry Elder in California tomorrow, but if you guys don't think California is a liberal state, you don't know people in California. How much vote fraud can there be? Can they take 1%? Probably. Can they take 2%? Maybe. Can they take 5%? Hard to believe. That's a lot of votes. It really is. And the problem is, if you think about how complicated and complex an election is, the sophistication of the logistics and personnel to be able to carry out institutional fraud to the level of, and I see Bianca in chat saying institutionalized media. Yeah, the media absolutely influences an election, but that's not what we're talking about. Yeah, and no question, we were talking about the FBI earlier influencing the election. And to me, that is election fraud, but that's a different kind of election fraud. It's not the kind where the ballot results aren't what they were reported to be. The election fraud we're talking about is people casting a ballot and the ballot not getting there, not being reported correctly, or someone else filling up the ballot for them that they never actually filled out. That's election fraud, and that happens, but there's only so much of a degree that it can happen. And by the way, it didn't happen for the first time in 2020. It's been happening in lots of elections. It's a hurdle we must overcome. But don't think that your involvement is not making any difference. Because if your involvement, first of all, if involvement didn't matter, why do liberal groups do everything they can to collect petitions and send in thousands of letters urging lawmakers to ban guns and legalize abortion and everything else? If it's all under their control, why are they sending those letters? Because politicians actually are influenced by their constituents. They actually do care when something they might do is going to make a whole lot of voters really, 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 really angry with them. Like, I don't know.
And look what's happening. Look what's happening in these school boards, where angry people are coming into the school boards, and they're petitioning. They're bringing more people every week, and they're raising hellfire and brimstone on these far left communist pro CRT lowlifes. And some of the weaker ones, they're just resigning. They're just saying, I quit. This is what I signed up for. I'm not going to take this. So just by applying pressure to the politicians, good things will happen. You'll put them on the spot. A lot of these people are arrogant, contemptuous. They're their own worst enemy. They'll shoot themselves in the foot, so to speak. So just having, just constantly applying the pressure onto the politicians is what needs to be done at every level, wherever it's practical. And if you think that giving up is the way to go, I mean, that's what the bad guys want. They want to be able to do this without any serious pushback. So we have to apply that pushback while we have the freedom to do so.
Yeah. So us Against Media in the chat says Time Magazine released a 7,000-word confession on how the 2020 election was masterminded by a hidden cabal. I know we've covered that. We've covered that story. But if a hidden cabal controlled the election, how did Trump win in 2016? That didn't just magically appear out of nowhere. Yes, the establishment can engineer the process. They can influence the process. They don't have total control. Melissa Williams says David Coulter got 40,000 emails this week. Win. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, David Coulter is the county executive in Oakland County. He's a Democrat. He took over the Oakland County, had been for a long time controlled by a Republican executive and Republican County Commission. The Democrats took that back a few years ago, and they've been doing everything possible to destroy the county. Here's an interesting question from Melissa Williams. Who organized those 40,000 emails? And do you think whoever it was that organized those 40,000 emails doesn't have 40,000 people to contact? Because that's what we're doing with our petitions. It's not just that we're also sitting you guys in with these petitions and letting your opinions be known to the politicians. We're building a list of people to mobilize. That's what you can do with your Unlock Michigan petitions, with your Secure My Vote petitions when those come out. If you're knocking on doors in your neighborhood and you're getting your neighbors to sign a petition, these are people you can contact. People who are volunteers, who are donors, who are organizers for your local elections. Some of them might even be good candidates for your local elections. These are organizing tools. They have a double effect. They have the effect of the petitions themselves. They have the effect of being an organizing tool. And by the way, also they have a follow-up in election season. If your politicians don't pay attention to your petitions, every one of those emails is an angry voter on election day. I mean, these are tools that you can use to build an organization, to build a movement. And don't think the left doesn't use these exact same tactics. What was Barack Obama's position on gay marriage? He opposed it. Why? Because there wasn't the political will yet. They built that over a period of years and years and years. And that's how that works. That's what they do. What they ended up doing was beating up and picking off politicians who were weak on the issue until the mainstream left was absolutely 100% in support of gay marriage, or else they would have trouble. And that's how the right has to operate. That's how they do operate very well on gun rights and very poorly on abortion. And the results for those speak for themselves. But that's the way that goes. That's why we kicked out this email blast yesterday, lighting up the legislature on this stupid immigration bill. Because when they get thousands and thousands of angry voters telling them what a dangerous mistake they're making and what an insult it is to them, they know there's grassroots energy out there that's going to cause them problems in elections, maybe even a problem in a primary. Is it enough to change them? Well, the more the better. The more likely it is, as Senator Everett Dirksen would say, when I feel the heat, I see the light. That's what politicians go by, is by what is it, What is the line I can't cross with the grassroots? They didn't think they could cross that. They thought they could cross that line on immigration. They're probably going to learn a lesson painfully over the next 7 days. But if people don't send those letters, they won't. Not until it's too late. Not until after they've already voted on it. That's a problem. Not a problem that can't be cured because you can still fight it in the Senate. But that's why these petitions do matter. Number one, they're sending the message to the politicians that this is a line they can't cross, that there is a constituency that's going to hold them accountable. And then in and of itself, the organizational effort of these petitions is building that movement to be able to hold them accountable for these things. So anyway, I could rant for a long time, but I've been ranting for plenty of time. So I don't know. What do you say, Shane?
Yeah, every little bit helps. There's going to be no silver bullet. Look at how Trump was elected. He was elected after years and years of agitating on the right. The Tea Party movement kind of made the fertile ground for someone like Trump to rise. And a lot of the promise of the Tea Party movement, particularly in terms of kind of what we were doing with Ron Paul's campaigns for president and Rand Paul's very ill-fated and forgettable campaign for president in 2016. A lot of those things, kind of fizzled out. But at the same time, doing it, just getting out there, agitating, fighting the good fight, it led to a good eventuality in President Trump. And Trump, he got the boot under illicit and bizarre circumstances with all the fraud. But at the same time, look at how many eyes that's opened up. So now we've got more people dialed in than ever before, and these people need to be organized. There's tons of people who, it's a matter of just getting them involved. And then they give their first speech at an event. They realize, hey, this, I'm good at this. This isn't scary. I enjoy fighting back against these people. And then next thing you know, they're elected, they're involved, they're a precinct leader, they're a precinct captain. This has already worked to a certain extent. And, now is not the time to give up. Now is the time where we should be doing more of this kind of stuff. And really, like I said, with COVID and all the stuff that they want to do to restrict our civil liberties, we have to maximize the freedom that we have right now. We can't just, go into our bunkers and become insular. A lot of people, they know that what's going on is not right. They know they're too scared to speak out, but they know what is being imposed on us is evil and wrong. And we reach those people. We go door to door. We're in my district, the 11th district. We're going to be at Troy Days, which is some festival coming up in I think next week, and we're going to be reaching out to people, talking about the issues there. And just trying to find ordinary family type people who they want their kids to live. They might not be nearly as right wing as you or me or the Trump base, but they just want their kids to be brought up in a free country. We have to be focused on those sort of people, not just in our echo chambers sharing the same documentaries over and over again with people, the same information. Getting in fights that don't make a whole lot of sense. That's how we lose. We have to get out there to the broader community, and you'll be surprised at how many people are amenable to the message of freedom right now.
Yep. Hey, by the way, congratulations to Steve Carra getting Trump's endorsement this past week. I first met Steve Carra when he was a volunteer for the Ron Paul campaign in 2011. And he became a legislative staffer, and then a legislator. Now he's a Trump-endorsed opponent for Fred Upton in the 2022 primary for that congressional seat. I hope the people of the 6th District rally behind him. But guess what that's going to take? Because Fred Upton's got the institutional Washington money. He's got the incumbency advantage. What's Steve Carra going to need? Grassroots. How do you grow that grassroots organization for your school board or your state house seat or state senate seat or your congressional seat? by getting out, knocking on doors, and identifying like-minded people. By the way, Shannon says, unfortunately, the Michigan legislature doesn't know their own power in state elections, and they do not care to know. You are correct, Shannon, and shame on them. They are fools, and all I can suggest is that you do your best with whoever your representatives and senators are. But I fully agree. They have a problem. It comes from leadership. It comes from Frank Luntz, too, by the way. Frank Luntz has had a panel with every class of legislators for every term I've been in the legislature, where he tells them what's popular. I remember, actually, just the past election cycle, I noticed that John Riley was the only Republican candidate in the entire district for any seat, you know, local or anywhere else, who had the word Republican on his yard signs. I knew where that came from because John had told me that the House Republican Campaign Committee had advised them that the Republican brand is not good, and it's better to style yourself as an independent than to put Republican on your yard signs. And it's like, yeah, well, it won't be a good brand if you guys don't defend it. You know, they have no conception of their own role in shaping public opinion. And this came out with the lockdowns too. You know why the Republicans weren't way more aggressive against Gretchen Whitmer and calling her a lunatic and a tyrant and a sociopath when the lockdown started in the middle of last year? Because they were advised that public opinion is that Whitmer's leadership was popular. It's like, yeah, you guys' job is to change that. But also the way Luntz sets up those focus groups and the way he asks the questions is all designed to slant in a certain way. So it's all about, you know, getting the lockstep, the uniparty going. You know, so it's all very much staged. Everything Luntz says is bullshit. He's been wrong about so much over the years. Actually, as a quick aside, Luntz, he was the guy who advised the Sackler family and who's behind Purdue Pharma and OxyContin. Right. Gave them the talking points to that made it easier for them to peddle their synthetic heroin to communities across the country and help them sloganeer different ways to get away with it for more years. So he's a very evil person, and you know, basically everything that's wrong with the Republican establishment, one guy is Frank Luntz. Yeah, I remember a pollster recently I was listening to, I forget who it was, but he was saying how if you poll people and you ask, should everybody be required to be vaccinated? Most people will say yes. But then if you ask them, should people be fired from their jobs if they don't have a vaccine? Most people say no. It's the same question, but the way you say it can engineer the polling results. And pollsters know this, and they're manipulators. But if you're a politician, your job is to influence the public opinion in your district. That's part of your job. And if you're just trying to go along with the mainstream, you are letting the mass media control the agenda, and ultimately they're not going to spare you. Sooner or later they're all going to get bowled over, and our country's going to, you know, burn in the meantime. Rachel asks, any words of advice as far as candidates and incumbents are concerned? Who do we trust? All right, that's a tough question. That's, I think, a two-part question, because candidates and incumbents are two different things. So, I mean, incumbents are also candidates, but there's a big distinction. So let me briefly address those as best I can. So first of all, with incumbents, the number one thing is you look at their record, and any incumbent's record is going to be mixed, and you're going to have to decide what you will put up with. And I would say there are certain things that are instant deal breakers. Fred Upton and Peter Meyer voting for the sham impeachment of Donald Trump, to me, that's treason. Nothing they ever do will redeem them from that. I will vote for anybody other than them. I would never, ever, ever, ever vote for them as the lesser of two evils, because they're not. They are not the lesser of two evils. And that's its own video. Look it up in our YouTube and Rumble channel, the biggest lie in politics. So there are things like that. On the opposite extreme, there are sometimes people that we call our champions, who are so good and so out there on such big issues that we will pardon them on some smaller things. And Lana Tice is kind of in a tough situation where on one hand she's great on some of those things as a champion, but then also a deal breaker on that Senate oversight report. So I don't know what to do with her. But I'm thinking of I'll give you one example. The late Senator Jesse Helms was a hardcore right winger. He actually kept a little piece of paper in his desk drawer. I know it's because one of my political mentors used to work for him, that had a list of things I will compromise on to win re-election. He was a U.S. Senator from North Carolina. So one of the things he had on his list was tobacco subsidies. Because if you're in North Carolina and you're a U.S. Senator in his day, you had to vote for tobacco subsidies or you're going to get destroyed your next election. Now, to his credit, he had this list and stuck to it. Most of them don't. But, I mean, there are, some issues where if you're politicians in a tough district, and I had the privilege of working for John O'Reilly, who was in what we call a safe seat, 65% Republican, so you could vote his conscience all the time. But if you're in a swing district and your politician is out there in a big way on lockdowns and election integrity and things that the left's going to be giving them major heat on, you might want to let some issues slide. And then on the other hand, the other thing to think about is always keeping your vote in play to some degree. When you're in a point where you'll put up with anything from any Republican because they're the lesser of two evils, you have no sway with your politicians because they know you're theirs. And likewise, if you are such a hardcore extreme person that it's not enough to oppose a budget, if the budget if there is a budget, it's too much, that leads to politicians thinking there is no way to please you. And that's a dangerous problem for the grassroots too, is that there's politicians in Lansing, and I know they are, that think there is no pleasing the grassroots. If you try, you'll only blow up in your face. Matt Maddock, you'll be called a rhino anyway, no matter what good stuff you do. And the lesson they learn is you're not going to get anything by being a grassroots person because they'll find any excuse they can to get mad at you anyway. You don't want to be there either.
That's the point. Yeah, that's the point I make is that, sometimes in social media, I'll make the point that, why would anyone want to run? Why would any good person want to throw their hat in when they're going to get attacked? I mean, it's one thing if it's a bad vote, which basically any lawmaker has, but just getting attacked on, day-to-day nonsense and conspiracy theories and speculation, why would any good, decent person want to throw their hat in there when they're going to be attacked by their own constituents over, either small potatoes or stuff that is either made up or, my secret sources have told me, get the hell out of here. Just people just speculating wildly and, running with it because, in the age of QAnon, we don't really care about verifying anything. So, this is the kind of atmosphere that's going to drive decent people away. And that's exactly what we don't need at this point. We need people running at local level, school board, library board, on up. And people aren't going to do that in this sort of toxic atmosphere among the grassroots. Yeah.
And then for candidates who are not incumbents, to get to the second part of Rachel's question, you got to be cautious. It is real easy to say great things when you have no record to be held accountable to. And in some cases, and I'm thinking of James Craig here, if you can't even say those things, then we got a real problem. But there's also some other candidates for governor who are promising the world, but, we don't really know how they would be. And by the way, tomorrow, James Craig's supposed to officially announce his candidacy. I'm going to tell you guys, whatever you think about all the other candidates for governor, the only one who is going to be remotely financially competitive at this point, from the numbers that came out officially, is Soldano. And some of them are not even remotely in his league. Now, maybe a few that are kind of in the middle might be able to expand where they're going, but running for governor takes money, and that's just the way that goes. But and number one, candidate surveys, get them on record. What are they willingly saying publicly? What are they outspoken about? What will they put in writing? Ask them. Send them an email, especially these local candidates. Ask them what they think about mask mandates and school closures and vaccine mandates and all the rest. And you'll be surprised how many of them will actually answer you. Get them on the record. But, you have to decide, number one, which races you're going to get involved with, because you only have so much time. There's local races, state races, federal races. So, if you're not sure if a candidate's worth your support, go somewhere else. There's other races, judge races, all kinds of things. Find someone that you feel genuinely certain is going to be with you. And by the way, even some of those people will let you down. But the biggest thing is getting them on record as much as you possibly can to know that they're genuinely committed to the issues. And look for the tells too. Like if someone says I'm pro-life, they're not pro-life. Pro-lifers don't talk like that. Look for people that will have the visual, the stories that convey the meaning of the issue to them. And that applies to all the issues, not just life issues. Shannon says, it seems citizens petition to limit health department powers gives the MDHHS 28 days, local department 28 days, then 28 days, 84 days total. Shannon, I'm not sure it works quite like that. I think there's two separate elements. One is the state orders and the other is the local orders. And the state MDHHS and the governor are the same thing. I don't think it works like that. There are shortcomings in this petition. We did a video about that. I can maybe put a link in the description for you, but it's somewhere back there. The petition could be better, but it's not bad. It's the reality is it will be better than it is today if the health departments cannot just issue any open-ended orders for an indefinite amount of time without any kind of accountability by the people. Shannon says
also,
they can be piggybacked. I'm not sure about that.
Adam,
huh?
One thing I wanted to mention, Adam, earlier you said no candidate's going to come close to having the war chest that Chief Craig has, but businessman Kevin Rinke is heavily rumored to throw his hat in to the race in the days to come. Okay. And he's got like tens of millions of dollars. He's going to supposedly self-fund his campaign. So that could be kind of a dark horse who comes out. Could be interesting. Sure. We'll see. I think Chief Craig brings a lot to the table, but he's going to have to offer some substance at the very least if he wants to win over a grassroots. That is. Yeah, let me be clear. I wasn't endorsing Soldano or anything like that. We're a long ways away from the primary for that election. There's still a lot of ways that race can change. So, a good approach is wait and see. I know I've got plenty to do without being involved in the governor's race in any way, shape, or form right now. And same for everybody else, because the more time passes, the more information we'll have. And yeah, you're right. If someone like that runs, question is, okay, how much of his money will he really put in? And what kind of campaign will he run? Who will his consultants be? What's his message going to be? What's he going to say? All these things. We just don't know yet. We just don't know yet. It's still very early. Before you commit to any politician, guys, make sure you really, really, really feel you can trust them. So, all right. One point before we wrap up is, how do you keep these people, how do you trust any of these politicians? You shouldn't trust any of them. What you should do is, form the local grassroots organization that is active, engaged, that the politician knows can do the work that's going to be holding them accountable. Because then they know if they mess up, this group that is credible, that isn't extreme, is community focused, this group will get the word out about the bad things the politicians is doing, and someone from the group who's credible can potentially primary challenge them, make them burn through a lot of their money. So this is how it's done. It takes eternal vigilance. It's not going to be one election cycle. Oh, we elected the guy, and now we can go back to, going up north every weekend and watching the game. And that's fine. You can do that every now and again. But what you need is eternal vigilance. You need to constantly have a focus on the community and on, civic engagement and being involved in politics. And we're seeing that more and more. But We have to not just be organized, but also be credible when we're, spouting speculation and gibberish. It makes it real easy for them to laugh us off. We need to be credible. We need to have, the right tactics, the right organization. I think we promote a lot of that at Rescue Michigan. Other organizations do too. But you need to be smart about it as well as do the work. And it never ends. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, as Thomas Jefferson said. So we always have to keep that in mind, that, even if we do win, even if we do take back the country and restore our freedom, we're still going to have to stay active in this fight. It's going to be our entire lives.
Yeah. There's a saying in management, I think I heard it from Scott Adams, but I'm not sure where it really came from. It was build systems, not goals. Don't put all of your political eggs in the basket of some candidate or some campaign. The question is, what are you going to build? What's your local movement? What is your impact as a grassroots leader going to be in the long term? Because all of these races are short term, and some of them seem long term because they're not till the end of next year, but time flies, and a campaign will often end in defeat. And the question then is, what becomes of that? Often the answer is nothing. But if you're an activist in a campaign and you're growing your list and you're growing your organization and you're keeping in touch with people and you're building a movement behind you, then you are creating and building a system for an ongoing, long-term, effective political change. One more thing before we go.
Infrastructure is probably, I think, the right word there. There's two examples of people who've kind of done that. Grover Norquist with his, Americans for Tax Reform, gets everyone to sign the pledge.
He's a cheap labor guy too, though.
What was that?
He's a cheap immigrant labor guy too, though.
Yeah, good point. But anyway, he's good on the tax issue. And Larry Pratt is of the Gun Owners of America. He is very effective on that issue and kind of moves the NRA to the right, makes it very, very difficult for gun control schemes to gain any sort of hold, at least in the GOP. So, once you get involved locally, you can get involved, in your community, in your county, you can always, as you grow and expand, you can build that infrastructure so that the politicians have to deal with you and your people. And that will make it more difficult for them to sell out, because they know there's going to be consequences if they go against what your agenda is. Yep.
All right. Well, anyway, the final thing before we close, the Mackinac Republican Leadership Conference is coming up, I think, next week, as is the Mackinac Policy Conference. We did an email about that, by the way, about any politician going to that. There's these two conferences. Let's be clear. They're separate. There's the Policy Conference put on by the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce. There's the chamber again. And they are demanding their politicians supplicate before them and show them their vaccine papers in order to attend. So I'll be very interested to see, and I think I've got some sources to find out, who among our elected lawmakers in Lansing will actually show their faces there and admit they are totally subordinate scum that only serve lobbyists. And then there's the Mackinac Republican Leadership Conference, which in some years has been an influential event for the presidential race, although I think everyone knows that if Trump wins, it's his nomination. He's not going to be beat by anybody. So I don't know if there's any particular presidential angle going on there this year, but it's always a big event. And Shane, I think you guys have an event that's going to be on the island coming up next week. Is that right?
Yes. Matt Gaetz is coming to the island. The America First representative out of Florida.
Excellent.
I was able to kind of help make that happen. So I'm very proud that is going to be put on the island. That's going to be Friday night on the island. So the actual date is Friday the 24th. Begins at 8 p.m. at the Pink Pony on Mackinac Island. So if you're going to be there, should be hopefully the biggest grassroots celebration there. Christina Caramo, the Trump-endorsed Secretary of State candidate, is a vote.
She's endorsed by Trump now.
Also, she is endorsed by Trump. Yes.
Here, great. I heard Lena Epstein's going to try to run for SOS.
Not anymore, I don't think. Not anymore. After that.
Good. Good.
But yeah,
That's
so
a big win, guys.
That's
Christina Caramo was awesome.
I think Caramo, I mean, she was doing such a great job before that. I think that Trump's endorsement is probably going to scare off anyone else who might have been considering it. So Christina will be there, Matt will be there, some of the leading, grassroots people in the state will be there. So it'll be a great, fun event, great networking event on the island. You don't even have to pay. I mean, you don't have to pay the MIGOP funds if you're on the island. Come on, there might be a small fee to get in, cover charge, but come on by. It's going to be a lot of fun, and show Matt Gaetz that if he's going to be running for higher office at some point, that Michigan has his back, and that's what we have to do to build the grassroots and to build the support the new leaders of the party, the future of the party, people like Matt Gaetz and Christina Caramo. So hope to see a lot of y'all there.
Excellent. I look forward to it. James Thomas says Craig is an establishment puppet. He stated that he's been following Duggan's orders for mask enforcement, etc., rather than doing the right thing. Yeah, I get that vibe. Maybe his rhetoric will change over the next few months, but so far as I can see, he's running a very timid campaign, and that's not the kind of campaign that we need. But we'll see. Like I said, we should reserve judgment at least for a little while, because that race is potentially going to change in a lot of big ways between now and the new year, so who knows. All right, guys. Well, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great show, and appreciate all the great comments in chat. As always, thanks for all that you do for liberty. And if you have any comments, if you have any issues with the website and the emails and petitions going to lawmakers, please drop us a line. If you like this kind of content, by the way, make sure you like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. We don't expect we're going to be long for this world on YouTube, but we do have a Rumble channel, so check us out there. This video will be posted there probably tomorrow. It's about how long it takes for the video to get processed and converted in YouTube, so check us out there as well. And again, you can subscribe there on Rumble, and that's going to be our future home once they start having live chat for these live streams. So again, thanks everybody. Thanks for all that you do for liberty, and until next time, hope to see you maybe in Bloomfield next Tuesday, maybe on Mackinac Island on Friday, next Friday, not this one. And in the meantime,